Hello, and welcome to James and the Frames. I'm your host, James, and here I talk about some of the greatest frames ever filmed while discussing film related topics with you guys. This is our 17th episode of this podcast, and today I will be talking about the 2011 film Drive, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, starring Ryan Gosling, Carey Mulligan, Oscar Isaac, Bryan Cranston, Ron Perlman, all around great cast. The synopsis is as follows. A stuntman and getaway driver falls in love with Irene, who is married to a criminal. In a bid to protect her from her husband and some gangsters, he decides to cross over to the other side of the law. Well, folks, that plot is partially true, but yes, I would highly recommend not watching the trailer for Drive before going in to see it. Oh my goodness, this is an intense neo-noir thriller that will keep you at the edge of your seat. There are great performances all around, particularly the one of Ryan Gosling. This was his golden age in 2011. He had just done Blue Valentine a year prior, and then a couple years after Drive, I believe he did Place Beyond the Pines, which is an amazing movie. I should review that because it's, oh my goodness, it's so good. So yes, Ryan Gosling's quote-unquote golden age, he still is a great actor. I mean, after Place Beyond the Pines, he did The Nice Guys and La La Land and Blade Runner 2049. All great movies. He does such a good job in this film. He plays a getaway driver, of course. But there's something about this getaway driver. He's not very talkative. He's kind of silent. He doesn't have a lot of quippy comments like any of your normal action movie stars would have. And that's what makes his character pretty interesting in this film. And I'm not going to say anymore, but it's great to watch. This film also stars Oscar Isaac, Carey Mulligan, Bryan Cranston, who I was pleasantly surprised to see. He looks like he had a fun time playing his role. Throughout this movie, you can really see that he was enjoying himself, and that's always nice to see. And speaking of seeing and viewing, this film has gorgeous cinematography. Gorgeous cinematography. The colors in this film are very contrasted, but it makes for some beautifully lit and color graded scenes. It pops out really well, especially when there's a certain tone that a scene needs to have or a certain feeling that you got to relate to. This director knows how to handle that. Nicholas Winding Refn, I believe, is colorblind, and that's why he uses such contrast in his images. And that makes the cinematography look really good. It doesn't look like an oversaturated color grade gone wrong. It's a beautifully shot movie. As well as the cinematography, the editing is fantastic. It really makes you squirm or ball up your hands in a fist, whenever you're watching something super intense and you kind of just like clench your fist or squint or like wince. That happens a lot throughout this movie. The scenes are edited so well. They're so tense. There's a couple of scenes in this film that really stood out to me, and I'll talk about some of them in the spoiler section. One of them involves a hammer. I'll leave it at that. But the editing is really, really great. The soundtrack, this soundtrack, this ethereal electronic pop music is so gritty and in sync with the tone that this film wants to have. I honestly can't see a better choice of music for this film because it works so well. There's a certain song in this movie that just relates to the main purpose of this story so much. That's also very, very catchy. And also the song that plays over the opening credits of this movie is a really great way to not cold open this movie, but it's just a great opening. It's like it makes you want to go out and take on the city in a Chevy Impala. Speaking of the opening scene, the opening scene is a very intense opening scene. I'm pretty sure there's previews on YouTube of the first 15 minutes of Drive. It doesn't spoil anything for the film. In fact, it could even be its own short film within itself, this opening scene. It's basically one of the driver's heists that he does with a couple guys. And we see how good he is behind the wheel, how he thinks, how he plans things out, what his boundaries are in terms of waiting for these guys. He tells them, he says, hey, 5 minutes, I'm yours, but after those 5 minutes are up, you guys gotta take care of your stuff on your own. It's a really, really good opening. It's drew me in right away to, first of all, the character of the driver. It made me understand how daring the film was going to be in terms of action and suspense and tension. And it added a lot of great moments of that tension and suspense. And where there's tension and suspense, there's also action. The action is really well done in this film. These sequences are edited to perfection. All the cuts feel very natural, and it's just immaculate. It's immaculate editing that flows just so well. And the best thing about this is that there is minimal use, or even no use, of CGI in this film. I have not detected a single use of CGI. This film does practical stunts with real drivers and real cars. It's amazing. It's so gritty and realistic, and all of this comes together in the great direction Nicholas Winding Refn takes this story in. In my opinion, this film is a true classic and will continue to impress audiences and myself for years to come. Well, that's basically all I can say in terms of spoiler-free talk, so I'm going to head into spoilers right now, spoiler discussion. If you have not seen Drive, please do yourself a favor and go see it. It's one of the most influential art house and neo-noir films of the past decade. People may say it's overrated, and that's fine. But I'll ask you, do you think it's overrated? Come to that judgment yourself, and we can talk about spoilers. Now, for those of you who have seen Drive, let's jump into this spoiler discussion. First of all, the scene I mentioned earlier, the one that was with the hammer. It's kind of odd because I talked about Old Boy last week, and there's an iconic scene where the main character goes through a hallway fighting people with a hammer. Except this time it is used in a more intense way. I recall, I think it was Christopher Nolan who said that in low-budget films, and Drive is low budgets, however, there are guns used in low-budget films, and sometimes they can be used in a good way. But what I'm saying about Christopher Nolan is that Christopher Nolan said, if you have a prop gun at your disposal, and the thing is that prop guns, they don't usually look realistic most of the time. They don't have the weight, they don't handle like a real gun. It's just not believable. But if you have a rubber hammer or a rubber baseball bat or a really cool prop like that, you can make some really intense scenes. And that's what Drive does so well. Our main character is not going in with a gun to point this gun to this guy's head and say, where are they? He's going in with a damn hammer. He breaks the guy's fingers, and he puts bullets right where his brain's supposed to be. And instead of shooting the bullet, he's going to hammer the bullet into his brain. I'll say it again. The tension in this film is just brilliant. The editing for this hammer scene is just perfection. And Gosling's performance helps immensely to it. It adds so much, and all these elements coming together makes one of the most tense scenes I have ever seen. Of course, that occurs after the entire sequence where Irene's husband, Standard, I always thought that was a Standard name, but don't blame me. Standard goes to rob the pawn shop, but it turns out both the driver and Standard have been shanghaied. That's a reference to another film in which Ryan Gosling stars in. I'll see if you guys catch that reference. Or double-crossed by the people who hired them. That scene had been white-knuckled. It was super suspenseful, especially the facial expressions by Ryan Gosling. He did not have to say a word. He just communicated to us with his facial expression how tense the moment really was and what he was feeling. I jumped about 6 feet into the air when the first gunshot rung out over the parking lot in that scene. And then when Standard gets gunned down, it's really sad and super tragic because now he has to run away with someone he doesn't know with a bunch of drug money inside his car, and just makes the situation that more dire. And it leads to the scene in the motel where he destroys these goons who come in through the windows. He takes a shower curtain and jabs it in this guy's throat, and blood is everywhere. And then he takes down another guy with a shotgun. It's a very violent scene, but it's violence used in a good way. Now, one of my favorite reviewers, Chris Stuckman, said in his original review for Drive, he said that he felt like an audience member who had seen Pulp Fiction, for example, back in the 90s when he saw Drive. And I can relate to that. There are a lot of violent moments that, in a way, it makes the film feel kind of nostalgic because it's invoking memories of those past films for me. But there are a lot of violent sequences. Another scene that's like this is the elevator scene, where Irene and the driver are both in an elevator, and the driver kind of pushes her back in like super slow motion or in real time. Who knows? It's kind of cool how the camera just kind of pulls back. It's a kind of a cool scene between these three people. There's this unknown thug who's in the elevator, and then there's the driver and Irene. And the driver shows his violent side in this film to Irene, a side of him she's never seen before. And I gotta say, the closing shot of that elevator scene, oh my goodness, it's just the driver staring out of the elevator door with like this wild, helpless look in his eyes, and Irene with just like an absolute, what the hell did I just witness face. It was very powerful. And speaking of powerful, the whole finale of this film had my heart pounding, and I was white-knuckled. This film basically takes you for a drive through this story in the most visceral and intense manner. It's really great, and I do have some questions about Drive that are regarding the spoiler aspects of the film, so I'm going to integrate that into the spoiler discussion. Of course, I'll actually put a timestamp where the non-spoiler questions start, but this will be incorporated into the spoiler section. All right, first question. Notice the use of mirrors and shadows playing some sort of role in the film. Thoughts? Well, if I had to think off the top of my head, I'd probably think it's a reflection of what people see when they look at the driver as a normal-ish guy who's kind of quiet and kind of keeps to himself. But it's not who the driver himself sees. It's not who the driver sees. The driver sees his inner demon that can come out. It visits us in a couple instances, few instances actually, one being the hammer scene or the time when the goons come to the motel where he's hiding, and of course the elevator scene. That scorpion off his jacket, it kind of breathes in a way whenever he's trying to get aggressive, and it's shown more in the elevator scene. He just goes all out, and that's what some people don't see about him. And if you listen to the lyrics of the opening song, Night Call, basically, lyrics say, I think there's something inside you, it's hard to explain. They're talking about you, boy, but you stay the same, or you're still the same. And that adds to my explanation a little bit. Like, there's something inside this person that he just can't really explain to anybody. It's this inner demon that he has, that he eventually uses for good, and then buries that away. But it's interesting to see Gosling's transformation, especially in a very subtle moment at a bar, when I think it was the same guy who was in the opening heist of the movie comes up to him and offers him a job. And the driver looks at him and says, either you shut your mouth or I kick your teeth down your mouth and I'll shut it for you. And his line delivery there is chilling. I got chills. For a second, I forgot it was Ryan Gosling. I was just watching this guy. He really transformed in that scene, and for some of these scenes, he really does transform. He goes all out, and that's one of the best aspects of this movie, is Gosling's performance. All right, and one more question here in regards of spoilers to Drive. Do you think violence was used in a good or bad way? Well, I kind of revisited this earlier in the episode, but yes, I think it was used in a good way. I think it was used in a necessary way. Of course, for maybe the scene where Bryan Cranston's character dies, it's a little intense. Like, but it's kind of like, I love the mustache twirling villain Albert Brooks. He plays such a menacing presence, and he just cuts this guy's arm down the middle. He says, "It's okay, it's over, no pain." It's just so insane. I was like, oh my god, this guy just tore his arm apart. But to get back on track about the whole violence thing, it's very realistic. It's depicted in a very realistic way. And another thing is that violence here isn't really used as shock value. It's used because it's a part of the gritty world in which these characters live. They solve things in very violent ways. We see that through the whole business that Ron Perlman's character runs, that usually, I don't know, some guy gets a fork stuck in his arm or something like that happens. And to see the driver use that side of him, going back to that character arc, it really shows how close the driver is actually to being a really bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. That's the whole point of the film, is that he's a real hero and a real human being, instead of these guys who are just corrupt drug lords or corrupt criminals. Yeah, I think the use of violence is really well done. But to end spoilers, I will give my general thoughts about the film. It's an intense neo-noir thriller that will keep you at the edge of your seat. There are great performances all around, gorgeous cinematography, fantastic editing, perfect soundtrack, and brilliant direction by Nicholas Winding Refn. And I absolutely give this film a 5 out of 5. It is really, really good. And a lot of my films have been 5 out of 5s because, well, that's the whole point of this show. I talked about the greatest frames ever filmed. So yeah, 5 out of 5 there. So let's jump into some non-spoiler Q&As. Q&As! Yay, hooray, awesome. Okay, so this one question is, since you're reviewing Drive, could you do an episode about Baby Driver? Baby Driver. It's such a good movie. What's funny is that I actually had a question asking me about a comparison between Drive and Baby Driver, but I can't do that because it's been a while since I've seen Baby Driver, and I'm going to have to give that a rewatch. But yeah, definitely I can do a Baby Driver episode. That film, it really struck a chord with me. It was really, really well done. I remember watching it and just being so impressed by the sound editing, and the sound editing was just amazing, and of course the ever so famous Edgar Wright style. Baby Driver is a great movie. And there's probably a lot of similarities that you could draw with Drive. I mean, the main character is pretty silent throughout the film. He doesn't speak much. He's a really good driver. He's referenced as Kid as well. The one thing, though, is that he doesn't really resort to any violent acts. He's a more pure version of the driver character in Drive. So, yeah, I'll do an episode about Baby Driver in the future. That sounds fun. Sure. Next question. Oh, it's not really a question. It's kind of like a comment. Love the Parasite video. Don't know why it doesn't have as much views as it should. Good job, man. Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the video that has been getting most views on my YouTube channel is the Haunting Details of the Prequels video. It's a Star Wars video that I did a couple of weeks ago, and it's gotten over 500 views, and I'm super happy for it. But I'm kind of surprised that my videos aren't getting as much views as that one. Maybe it's just a YouTube algorithm and I gotta learn how it works. I'm still coming back to YouTube and trying to learn a little more. But yeah, thank you for the kind words, man. It's I love making videos for you guys, so I'm gonna keep doing it. Oh, this is fun. I'll probably have a short answer for this, but it's fun. What's your favorite M&M flavor? That, my dear friend, would be coconuts. Yes, there are coconut M&Ms that exist, and they are awesome. Coconut it just has a great, I can't describe it. It's just amazing. So coconut M&Ms, amazing. How do you feel about people watching movies on their phones? Goodness my, that question, I could go on for hours. But I'm going to give you the most simple response. First of all, watching a movie on your phone, it depends on the film you're watching. If you're watching, say, Saving Private Ryan on a 4.7-inch touchscreen, it's not going to have the same impact on you if you were to watch it on a phone, because it's really meant for the theater. That film is really meant to be watched on a huge screen with big speakers, and just it's that kind of movie. But if you're watching a film like, let's say, Clerks, or I don't know, something, heck, even in Short Term 12, those films, sure, they can be seen on a big screen, but it's easy to watch them on a phone, and it really doesn't detach from the experience. I'm guessing what I'm trying to say is that the scale of the images that were meant for a movie theater do not translate well to a phone. And when people watch those types of movies on their phones, that's what kind of gets under my skin. But I will say this, though. I would prefer so much more if you'd watch it at least on a laptop screen. Or if you have an access to a 20-inch monitor, just hook your computer up to that monitor and watch it on there with some mediocre speakers, because that's the way movies were meant to be seen. And I understand for some people they don't have the best sound system or the best display, but watching your film on a bigger screen, it draws you in more. And secondly, the experience is so much better. It's so much better. I've only seen a handful of films on my phone, and they haven't come close. They've never come close to experiences that I've had at a movie theater or watching it on my TV. So I don't really feel that great about people watching movies on their phones. Tablets, they're 20 inches, they're 21 inches, so I guess they could count as like a small computer monitor, that's fine. But phones, they're so tiny. They're so small, you won't be able to pick up the details that the filmmakers want to incorporate in the film. It'll strain your eyes. You have to see a movie on a big screen. That's my point on that. I could go on for a while, but for sake of time, I'll keep it that way. All right, one last question. Thank you guys for coming back with these questions. So starting to run out. Don't worry, I'm kidding. Favorite Safdie brother movie? Well, okay, so they've only done 2, right? They've done 2 and maybe a couple short films. They've done Uncut Gems and they've done Good Time. Good Time is just, it's a thrill ride from start to finish. And Uncut Gems, well, not even, oh my goodness, it's so good. I'd probably have to say Uncut Gems because I familiarize more with Adam Sandler's performance in a dramatic role. Robert Pattinson, for me, his best performance is The Lighthouse. It's definitely The Lighthouse. And Good Time, he does a fantastic job as well. And it's a really good independent film, Good Time. And I recommend it for a lot of my filmmaking friends, just to see. You don't need a huge budget to make a really good story. Because that story in that film, it was made for like a couple $1 million, not even a couple $1 million, maybe even less. And it's such a good movie. And Uncut Gems it's really good. It's fantastic. I've seen it twice already, and it's very rewatchable. Surprisingly, it's very rewatchable. And it's one of Adam Sandler's best performances. His performance in Punch Drunk Love was also really good in that really great Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Love that movie. I'd probably have to say Uncut Gems. But I should give Good Time a rewatch and see what to compare. Because they're both really good movies. But for now, I'm going to go with Uncut Gems. And for now, this has been the 17th episode of James and the Frames. I'm glad we're along 17 episodes. This podcast has been going strong for about 4 months now, and I'm super happy to be on here. I really am. I'm really excited to talk about more of these amazing, amazing films. Have more guests on, definitely. I'm planning on it. Maybe next week or the week after, we'll have a guest on. And that'll be fun. That'll be so much fun. But until then, thank you all so much for the support with this podcast. This has been James and the Frames. And I will see you guys after the credits.